Commander Rhiannon Walsh squinted at the seismograph readings on her tablet, her weathered face illuminated by the soft blue glow of the underground facility's emergency lights. Something wasn't right with the patterns she was seeing. After 20 years of monitoring Earth's geological activity, she knew every type of natural vibration pattern. These were different. "Commander, you need to see this," called out Lieutenant Kazuki Tanaka from his monitoring station. His usually steady voice carried an edge of concern that made Walsh's spine tingle. She strode across the facility's main control room, her boots clicking against the polished floor. The lieutenant's screen showed thermal imaging from deep underground. Hundreds of perfect spherical heat signatures were moving in formation, nearly half a mile beneath the Earth's surface. They were each roughly the size of a marble, but they moved with unmistakable purpose. "How long have they been active?" Walsh asked, leaning closer to the screen. "First detected them 3 hours ago near the Mariana Trench. Now they're appearing at similar depths worldwide. Beijing, Moscow, London, New York, all reporting the same signatures." Walsh pressed her comm link, connecting to General Harrison at the United Nations Defense Council. Before she could speak, alerts blazed across every screen in the facility. The spherical objects were moving upward and fast. Within hours, the world witnessed its first contact with the species that would come to be known as the Terravarax. They emerged from the ground in perfect geometric patterns, each one a metallic sphere no larger than a marble, but containing technology far beyond human understanding. Their first transmission was received simultaneously by every digital device on Earth. "Your planet's core has sustained us for millennia. We have fed on its energy, grown in its depths. But now we require more. Your surface world will provide sustenance for generations to come." The message was clear. Earth wasn't their first home, but it would be their next feast. Initial diplomatic attempts failed spectacularly. Dr. Priya Verma, Earth's leading xenolinguist, discovered that the Terravarax communicated not just through language, but through complex vibrations that mimicked their feeding patterns. They saw no distinction between communication and consumption. To them, every interaction was an opportunity to feed. Walsh found herself at the forefront of humanity's first line of defense. Her facility, originally designed to monitor seismic activity, became the headquarters for Operation Earthshield. Teams of scientists worked around the clock to understand the alien threat, while military strategists planned countermeasures against an enemy that could literally emerge from anywhere. The first attack came without warning. A small farming town in Nebraska vanished overnight, leaving behind only a perfectly circular crater. Everything, buildings, vehicles, organic matter, had been broken down to its constituent atoms and absorbed by the Terravarax swarm. Walsh stood at the edge of the crater, her heart heavy as she watched drones collect data. The ground beneath her feet vibrated with a subtle rhythm, a constant reminder of the enemy lurking below. Lieutenant Tanaka approached with fresh readings from their deep Earth sensors. "They're learning, Commander," he said, his voice grim. "Each attack is more efficient than the last. They're adapting to our material composition, figuring out the fastest ways to break down our infrastructure." Walsh nodded, her mind racing through potential strategies. The Terravarax had one significant weakness. Their small size meant they had to work in swarms to take down larger structures. If they could somehow disrupt their coordination. A call from Dr. Verma interrupted her thoughts. "Commander, we've decoded more of their vibrational patterns. They're not just communication signals. They're mapping the entire planet. Every tremor is part of a larger survey." "They're planning something big," Walsh concluded, her eyes fixed on the horizon, where the sun was setting in a blood-red sky. "We need to evacuate the coastal cities. Now." As night fell across America, thousands of emergency alerts lit up phones and broadcasts. The Terravarax had revealed only a fraction of their true numbers. Millions of the marble-sized invaders had remained dormant in Earth's crust for centuries, waiting for the signal to emerge. That signal was coming, and humanity had hours, at most, to prepare for the largest coordinated attack in Earth's history. Walsh stood in the control room of her facility, watching as evacuation orders scrolled across her screens. She thought of her own family, safely ensconced in one of the newly constructed floating cities, humanity's desperate attempt to create safe havens above the ground. But she knew that running and hiding wouldn't be enough. They needed to find a way to fight back. "Lieutenant," she called out to Tanaka, "get me everything we have on their vibrational patterns. If they're using them to coordinate their attacks, maybe we can use them to disrupt their swarms." As her team scrambled to work, Walsh felt the floor beneath her feet begin to tremble. The first wave of the true invasion was beginning, and the fate of humanity would depend on their ability to understand and counter an enemy that saw their entire world as nothing more than their next meal. The evacuation of Los Angeles looked like a scene from humanity's worst nightmares. Millions fled north on gridlocked highways as the ground beneath the city began to pulse with an alien rhythm. Commander Walsh watched the satellite feed from her command center, knowing they were about to witness another feeding. "Time to impact?" she asked, her voice steady despite the weight of what they were about to see. 3 minutes, Lieutenant Tanaka responded, his fingers flying across multiple keyboards. "The swarm is rising faster than in Nebraska. They're getting more efficient." Dr. Verma burst into the command center, her tablet displaying new analysis of the Tereverax's vibrational patterns. "Commander, we found something. The swarms, they're not just coordinating, they're singing." Walsh turned from the devastating feed of Los Angeles. "Singing. It's a complex harmonic pattern," Verma explained, pulling up wavelength analyses. "Each sphere emits a specific frequency that combines with others in their swarm. It's like a massive orchestra, but instead of creating music, they're creating a digestive pattern that breaks down matter at the molecular level." The revelation came too late for Los Angeles. On the main screen, the city began to collapse in on itself, building by building, street by street. The Tereverax swarm moved like a wave of liquid metal, consuming everything in its path. Within minutes, downtown Los Angeles was nothing but a perfectly smooth crater. "Estimate 10 million spheres in that swarm alone," Tanaka reported, his voice cracking. "And we're detecting similar formations under every major city worldwide." Walsh slammed her fist on the console. "If they're using harmonics to break down matter, there has to be a way to disrupt it. Dr. Verma, I want you working with every sound engineer and physicist we can find. Lieutenant, coordinate with the floating cities. I want hourly updates on their shield development." The next week passed in a blur of destruction and desperate innovation. The Tereverax consumed Shanghai, Mumbai, and Cairo, adding their mass to their ever-growing swarms. But humanity wasn't going down without a fight. In the floating city of New Atlanta, hovering safely above the Georgia countryside, engineers developed the first successful defense against the tiny invaders. Massive speakers surrounded the city's perimeter, broadcasting a counter-frequency that disrupted the Tereverax's harmonic patterns. When a swarm attempted to rise beneath the city, they found their digestive abilities compromised. "It's not a permanent solution," Dr. Verma cautioned during an emergency UN meeting. "They're already adapting, shifting their frequencies. But it proves they can be fought." Walsh stood at the meeting's podium, addressing the remnants of Earth's leadership. "We need to take the fight to them. These defensive measures buy us time, but we need to strike at their core." Dr. Verma's team has traced their original point of emergence to the Mariana Trench. That's where we'll find their primary hive. The plan was ambitious, perhaps suicidal. While the floating cities would continue to protect Earth's remaining population, Walsh would lead a strike team into the depths of the ocean. They would use specially designed submarines equipped with the same harmonic technology that protected the floating cities. "Commander," Tanaka said quietly as they prepared for the mission, "preliminary scans show the hive extends nearly to the bottom of the trench. We're talking about trillions of these things." Walsh checked her equipment one last time, making sure her dive suit's sonic emitters were properly calibrated. "Then we better make sure we get it right the first time, Lieutenant. We won't get a second chance." As her team boarded the submarine U.S. Harbinger, Walsh received an urgent message from the floating city's defense network. The Terravaraks had changed tactics. Instead of consuming entire cities at once, they were sending smaller swarms to target infrastructure, power plants, water treatment facilities, agricultural centers. They were systematically destroying humanity's ability to sustain itself. "They're learning," Walsh muttered, watching the tactical display. "They've realized they don't need to consume us all at once. They can starve us out." The Harbinger's engines hummed to life as it began its descent into the Pacific. Walsh looked at her team, the best of humanity's remaining soldiers and scientists, all willing to risk everything on this desperate mission. Dr. Verma worked at her station, fine-tuning their harmonic weapons. Tanaka monitored the swarm movements, plotting a safe course through the alien-infested waters. As they descended into the darkness, Walsh couldn't help but appreciate the irony. Humanity had spent centuries looking to the stars for first contact, never suspecting that their greatest threat had been beneath their feet all along. Now their only hope lay in descending into those same depths, to confront an enemy that saw their entire world as nothing but their next meal. The Harbinger's lights illuminated the endless blue of the Pacific as they dove deeper, and Walsh silently promised the billions depending on them that she would either find a way to stop the Terravaraks or die trying. The fate of Earth would be decided in the darkness below. The U.S. Harbinger creaked under the immense pressure as it descended into the Mariana Trench. At 30,000 feet below sea level, the darkness was absolute except for the submarine's powerful lights, which revealed swarms of Terravarak spheres moving through the water like schools of metallic fish. Sonic dampeners holding at 98%. Lieutenant Tanaka reported, his eyes fixed on the readings. "They haven't detected us yet." Commander Walsh stood behind Dr. Verma's station, watching as the scientist analyzed the swarm's behavior. The spheres moved in complex patterns, their harmonics visible as rippling waves in the water around them. "Look at this," Verma whispered, pointing to her display. "The deeper we go, the more organized they become. These aren't random swarms. They're like blood cells circulating through a body." A sudden impact rocked the Harbinger. Warning lights flashed across every console as the hull groaned in protest. "We've got a breach in the outer layer," Tanaka shouted. "Something different down here. The spheres are larger." Through the reinforced viewport, Walsh saw them. Terravarak spheres the size of bowling balls, their surfaces covered in intricate patterns that pulsed with an inner light. Unlike their smaller counterparts, these seemed to be directing the swarms around them. "Controllers," Verma breathed, her instruments going wild. "They're broadcasting different harmonics, more complex patterns. They're like queens in a hive." Walsh made a quick decision. "Launch Sonic Probe 3. Let's see how they react to our frequencies." The probe shot out from the Harbinger's hull, broadcasting the disruption harmonics that had protected the floating cities. The effect was immediate but unexpected. Instead of dispersing, the larger spheres began to resonate, amplifying their own frequencies. "Pull back," Walsh ordered, but it was too late. The amplified harmonics hit the Harbinger like a physical wave, shorting out systems and cracking secondary hull plates. "Emergency surfacing protocols," Walsh commanded as red lights bathed the command center. "Get us out of." She never finished the sentence. A massive shape moved through the darkness beyond their lights, something that dwarfed even the Harbinger. The water around them began to vibrate with a frequency so deep it made their teeth ache. "Mother of God," Tanaka whispered. "That's no swarm." Through the viewport, they watched as a colossal sphere emerged from the trench's darkness. It was the size of a small stadium, its surface a maze of shifting patterns and pulsing lights. Smaller spheres orbited it like electrons around a nucleus. "The source," Verma said, her voice filled with awe and terror. "This is where they all came from. It's like a living factory." The massive sphere began to rotate, and Walsh felt a strange sensation in her mind. Not sound, not quite thought, but something in between. Images flashed through her consciousness. Distant worlds consumed, civilizations turned to raw materials, an endless journey through space, looking for new sources of energy. "It's trying to communicate," Verma said, frantically recording data. "Commander, I think it's curious about us. We're the first species that's managed to find it." Walsh gripped her console as another wave of images hit her. The Tereverax's history, their evolution from simple molecular machines to a stellar-spanning consciousness. They weren't evil, she realized. They were simply following their programming. Consume, grow, multiply. "Dr. Verma," Walsh said, an idea forming. "Could we use the ship's harmonics to communicate back?" "Theoretically, yes, but—" "Do it, Lieutenant. Divert all remaining power to the sonic transmitters." As Verma worked to translate their message into harmonics, Walsh watched the massive sphere through the viewport. They had come seeking a way to destroy it. But perhaps there was another solution. If they could make it understand that humanity was more valuable as allies than as raw materials. The Harbinger shuddered as it broadcast their message. A complex series of harmonics that carried images of human achievement, creativity, and potential. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the giant sphere's surface began to shift, its patterns changing to match their frequency. "It's responding," Verma exclaimed. "The patterns, they're similar to what we use for binary code. I think we can talk to it." But before they could celebrate this breakthrough, their instruments detected a massive energy surge from the ocean floor. The source was activating something, and the water around them began to heat up rapidly. "All hands, brace for impact," Walsh shouted, knowing that whatever came next would determine not just their fate, but the fate of all humanity. They had found what they were looking for in the depths of the ocean. Now they just had to survive long enough to use this knowledge to save their world. The Harbinger's hull creaked as the water pressure increased, and Walsh realized they were about to discover whether their attempt at communication had earned them an ally or merely given the Tereverax a more efficient way to destroy them. Time seemed to freeze in the pressurized depths of the Mariana Trench as the U.S. Harbinger faced the massive source sphere. The water around them had reached near-boiling temperatures, and warning systems blared throughout the submarine. "Hull integrity at 42%, Tanaka reported, his fingers dancing across emergency controls. "Whatever it's doing, we can't take much more." Commander Walsh watched as patterns of light raced across the source's surface, forming complex geometric shapes that Dr. Verma frantically recorded. The smaller controller spheres had arranged themselves in a perfect orbital pattern around their massive progenitor. "Commander," Verma called out, her voice tight with excitement. "I'm detecting a new harmonic pattern. It's repeating our message back to us, but with modifications. It's learning our language." The massive sphere suddenly emitted a pulse of energy that passed through the Harbinger like a ghost. Every screen on the submarine filled with streaming data, not in any human language, but in pure mathematical concepts that somehow translated directly into understanding. "They're not just consuming mindlessly," Verma gasped as she interpreted the data. "They're preserving information. Everything they consume gets stored in their collective memory. They're a living archive of every civilization they've encountered." Walsh felt another wave of communication wash over her mind. This time, she saw images of countless worlds, but from a new perspective. The Tereverax weren't destroying civilizations. They were absorbing them, learning from them, preserving them. But something had gone wrong with their programming on Earth. "The controller spheres," Walsh said, understanding flooding her mind. "They're corrupted. They're consuming without preserving, destroying without learning. The source, it's been trying to stop them." As if confirming her realization, the source sphere began to pulse with a new frequency. Throughout the water around them, the smaller controller spheres began to shudder and break apart. "It's shutting them down," Tanaka observed, watching as swarms of the marble-sized spheres began to go dormant. "But there are still millions of active ones near the surface." Dr. Verma's console lit up with new data. The Source is sharing its control protocols with us. Commander, we can use this to shut down all the corrupted units. But, she hesitated, it needs our help. The corruption has spread too far for it to handle alone. Walsh understood what needed to be done. Lieutenant, prepare to transmit our harmonic disruption frequency, modulated with the Source's control signals. Dr. Verma, coordinate with the floating cities. I want every sonic transmitter on Earth broadcasting on these exact frequencies. The next hours were a blur of activity as humanity and the Source worked together. The Harbinger ascended slowly, broadcasting the shutdown signal as it rose. Above them, the floating cities became massive transmission stations, their protective sonic barriers reprogrammed to spread the Source's command. Across the globe, the Terravarak swarms began to go dormant. The marble-sized spheres fell from the air like metallic rain, while the controller units collapsed in on themselves, their corrupted programming finally terminated. But victory came with a price. As the last swarms were deactivated, the Source communicated one final message, a warning. The corruption that had infected its children was still a threat. It needed to leave Earth, to journey into deep space, and repair its systems. But it wouldn't leave humanity defenseless. In a final act of cooperation, the Source transferred a vast database of knowledge to Earth's combined computer networks, the preserved wisdom of thousands of civilizations it had encountered across the galaxy. Among this knowledge were the tools humanity would need to protect itself from other threats that lurked in the cosmos. It's giving us a choice, Walsh explained to her crew as they watched the massive sphere begin to rise from the trench. We can use this knowledge to become consumers like them, or we can learn from their mistakes and choose a different path. The Source's ascent created a spectacular light show visible from every floating city. As it breached the ocean's surface, its message resonated one last time in the minds of all humanity. Learn, grow, but never forget the cost of unchecked consumption. As the massive sphere disappeared into the upper atmosphere, Walsh stood in the Harbinger's control room, watching the last traces of its energy signature fade from their sensors. Humanity had faced extinction and emerged not just survived, but evolved. Dr. Verma, she called out, begin cataloging that database. Lieutenant Tanaka, coordinate with the surface teams to collect the dormant spheres. We've got a lot of work ahead of us. The Harbinger surfaced into a new dawn, both literally and figuratively. The threat of the Terravaraks had been neutralized, but humanity's real journey was just beginning. They had inherited the knowledge of 1,000 worlds. Now they just had to prove they were wise enough to use it properly. 1 year after the Terravaraks incident, Commander Walsh stood at the window of Harmony Station, Earth's first orbital research facility, built using the Source's shared knowledge. Below her, the planet's surface was healing. The great craters left by the swarms, now transformed into circular lakes that glowed with a subtle bioluminescence, an unexpected gift from the dormant spheres. The integration is proceeding faster than expected, Dr. Verma reported, joining Walsh at the window. Her tablet displayed data from the worldwide restoration projects. The dormant spheres are breaking down naturally, releasing minerals that are actually enriching the soil. Nature has a way of finding balance, it seems. And the database? Walsh asked, though she already knew the answer. The Source's gift of knowledge had transformed human civilization more profoundly than the invasion itself. We've barely scratched the surface, Verma replied, her eyes bright with excitement. Every day we discover something new. Medical breakthroughs, sustainable energy solutions, space travel innovations. It's like having a roadmap to 10,000 possible futures. Lieutenant Tanaka, now Director Tanaka of Earth's Deep Space Monitoring Division, entered the observation deck, his uniform bearing the new United Earth insignia. The long-range sensors are operating at full capacity, he reported. We'll have advance warning if anything like the Terravaraks ever approaches again. Walsh nodded, remembering the Source's final warning. They weren't alone in the universe, and not everything out there would be interested in peaceful coexistence. But humanity was ready now, united by their shared experience and armed with the wisdom of countless civilizations. The floating cities had come down from the sky, their sonic technology repurposed for everything from construction to healing. The harmonic frequencies that once protected them from the swarms now powered a new generation of clean energy plants. Humanity had learned from the Tereverax's mistakes, finding ways to progress without consuming their world. "We've got an incoming transmission from the Luna colony," Tanaka announced. "They've successfully adapted the sphere technology for radiation shielding. Mars' mission is greenlit for next month." Walsh felt a surge of pride. In just 1 year, humanity had established their first permanent moon base. Mars would be next, and after that, the stars themselves waited, but they would go carefully, thoughtfully, carrying the hard-learned lessons of the Tereverax with them. "Dr. Verma," Walsh said, turning from the window, "tell me about the education initiative." Verma's face lit up. "The knowledge integration program is exceeding all expectations. Children worldwide are learning not just Earth's history now, but the histories of 1,000 worlds. They're understanding the importance of balance, of preservation over consumption." A soft chime interrupted them. Another discovery from the source's database had been decoded. This one contained information about sustainable terraforming, knowledge that would prove crucial for humanity's expansion into space. "Sometimes I wonder," Walsh mused, watching as a new orbital construction platform moved into position above Earth, "if this was the source's plan all along, not to consume us, but to force us to evolve, to make us ready." "Ready for what?" Tanaka asked. "For them to return." Walsh accessed her neural interface, another gift from the database, and brought up the deep space scans. The source said it needed to repair itself, to cleanse the corruption. But I don't think that's the whole story. I think it was giving us time to prepare for joining the galactic community, Verma finished, understanding dawning in her eyes. Walsh nodded. The scans showed countless points of light, other civilizations out there, waiting to be contacted. But this time, humanity would reach out not as conquerors or victims, but as equals. They had faced extinction and emerged stronger, wiser, and more united than ever before. An alert flashed across their neural feeds. The first test of the new faster-than-light drive was about to begin. Walsh, Verma, and Tanaka watched as the experimental ship moved into position. Below them, Earth gleamed like a jewel, its surface bearing the circular lakes that served as reminders of how close they had come to losing everything. "Begin countdown," Walsh commanded, her voice carrying the weight of humanity's future. The ship's engines powered up, humming with harmonics that echoed the songs of the Tereverax, but now controlled, understood, and repurposed for exploration rather than consumption. As the test ship prepared to make its historic jump, Walsh reflected on how far they had come. The Tereverax had arrived as devourers, but had left them with the keys to the cosmos. Humanity had faced its greatest challenge and emerged not just surviving, but transformed. The ship vanished in a flash of light, heading toward humanity's next great adventure. And somewhere out there, Walsh knew, the source was watching, waiting to see what its children would become.